escrito mal la PL, pero bueno. Listo.
Okay. ¿En qué página estamos ahorita? Taro.
Sí, ya puedes hablar, ya estamos en vivo.
Pero ¿desde qué página estamos? ¿Desde qué página estamos?
En el YouTube, en el canal del Golf.
En el canal del Golf. ¿Qué tal a todos los compañeros que nos están viendo ahorita desde el canal o que nos puedan ver a futuro del canal del Golf? Ahorita estamos, empezamos ya de una vez la entrevista al compañero del APL de Estados Unidos, Sebastián Lemba, ¿no? Lo pueden pronunciar así en español, lo pueden pronunciar también Sebastián Lemba, if you wanna. I don't know how to pronounce it very well in English. Él es de esta organización de izquierda y comunista, marxista-leninista en Estados Unidos. El compañero me parece que tiene un trabajo en el sector social. Él nos va a contar, él solamente, como nos estaba ya hablando por interno él hace un rato, es más fácil para él que la entrevista sea en inglés, ¿no? Porque él domina más ese idioma que el español, a pesar de que entiende algunas palabras de español, sobre todo por cuestiones de familia, ¿no? Él es de una familia originaria de República Dominicana, me dice. No necesariamente, creo que no es la capital, pero es de República Dominicana, digamos. Y ahorita empezaríamos con la pregunta general, sí, para no dar más vuelta. Sebastian, can you hear me?
Yep, I hear you just fine.
Okay. We're starting this interview about talking about your organization in Estados Unidos, APL.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? Okay.
That's correct. Yes, the APL. It stands for American Party of Labor.
American Party of Labor. Yeah. Can you tell us something about the history of this organization?
Yeah.
How do you integrate this organization from what's your history with the APL, and finally, what's the situation of the labor sector in the USA, of the proletarian or the workers or the work class broadly in the USA? That's all the questions.
Yes. So you want me to answer that now? All those questions?
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. And feel free to stop me to ask any clarifying questions or anything like that. But the American Party of Labor technically was founded in 2008. It started out as kind of a loose group of people throughout the country. From my understanding, I didn't join until 2014. But it came together as kind of a project to reintroduce the concepts of anti-revisionism and anti-opportunism within the American, let's say, communist movement. That really hasn't been remarkably active and significant since, I want to say, the 70s. There are many difficulties that led to the dissolution of the communist movement. A lot of them were institutional. A lot of them came from the FBI and the CIA, and these programs like COINTELPRO, creating all kinds of divisions that continue. It actually, these false arguments that continue to kind of create these divisions in the American communist movement. Things like regarding like the nationalities, the national struggles of oppressed identities within the United States itself, putting primacy over national identity within the movement here, in front of the class struggle. So the APL started out in that capacity. It was initially put together by people, no offense if they're still around, but the vast majority of the people who put that together.
We're losing your audio, Sebastian.
Oh, can you hear me? Is that better?
Yeah. Continue.
Okay. All right. Yeah. the vast majority of people, I'd say, who came together to form the APL are no longer in the APL, and a lot of them didn't really have the required experience and knowledge to kind of carry on this mission. So at some point before 2014, we have the addition of a man named Alfonso and another man named Victor, and these people made up at some point different parts of our leadership, and they really kind of took this project very seriously and reorganized APL to the point where I think there's a distinction. I would say that we got refounded, or rather we were truly founded somewhere between 2014 and 2016 is when we really started to engage in politics more directly, less about like making commentary on political situations, but actually really involving ourselves to change politics, to the point where in some cities where we had a presence early on, when the George Floyd protests were happening nationally, a lot of people were adopting the phrase, the slogan of defund the police, which is a valid slogan. It's fine, but it's very it has some holes in it, and a lot of people can interpret that in very many different ways. That it becomes kind of a little bit of an ultra left slogan, whereas our slogan was a much more doable, much more immediately doable a demand, which was community control of the police. So our demand would be to create these democratic boards in municipalities and in counties that would mandate whether or not a person could even start a job as a police officer based on their history, and civilian review board would look at their job history, whether as a police officer or otherwise, and do their background checks, and also be able to have the full power to fire police officers based on their job performance. So it would be a democratically elected body, all that stuff. Funny enough, there's nothing actionable with defund the police, because you could just refund the police, right? But if you create legislation that that dictates that this board can basically say how the police patrol their cities, you formalize that within legislation, and you have these official bodies. While people were calling for defund the police, our party had that slogan, and the slogan was adopted by the community in various cities. However, like in Orlando, on a state level, right after the George Floyd protests, Ron DeSantis legislated, and he's our state governor. Ron DeSantis legislated that there could not be community accountability boards for the police. They're no longer legally allowed. Not that I don't think we ever had them, and if we did, they were in cities that I wasn't aware of. But the more effective slogan did not get adopted nationally, but more concrete things have been done to make sure that we cannot achieve that, because they know it's an actual threat to their power. Whereas defund the police, I mean, again, kind of sort of meaningless. Sorry, I don't want to go on a tangent about that. What I'm trying to say is, we have been very, very effective in our organizing. We kind of follow the Leninist tradition of the idea of forming a vanguard party. For what that's worth, we have expert organizers. We have union organizers who make up the party. We don't allow very many people. It's not that we want to be exclusionary. In fact, the opposite. We would like to be more inclusive. But we have developed in a way that we want to make sure that, especially kind of in the earliest phases of our organization, we really do want to have a kind of an expert base. So we can, the idea, I think, is to open up either like through mass orgs or like a party kind of support unit or something, to allow more people broadly in, because Americans have this crazy like intuition to want to be part of something but not want to be part of the work. Back to the history of the APL. Sorry. So with Victor and Alfonso, we redirected under their leadership, and I was a part of that those early efforts, because this is like after 2014 is when I joined. We really refocused our party newspaper to deal more in focused, original content, focused on actual authentic reporting that we do on the local level and on a national level. Because before that, I think the Red Phoenix was just kind of reposting things from like the Daily Costs and some other things. It wasn't really a newspaper. So these people kind of got us into shape. And then like COVID happens, and a lot of stuff happens there. A lot of people got kind of tested with that, organizers and their actual commitment to our ideology and ideas and our agenda, our strategic aims. And so what happens is we kind of see through this process, we kind of see who's sticking with us, who's really, really committed to changing our politics, changing the world. And we restructure and we have a new leadership body made up of these people who have a provable history of organizing work and how do I say, like commitment and seeing things through. And now I would say we're in a position where honestly we're just waiting for the next big kind of class conflict that shows itself on the street for us to we're prepared to take on many more new people. Our name, our brand has kind of grown, if you want to call it a brand, has kind of grown throughout, but mostly through, unfortunately, places like the internet. A lot more people know us from researching on like Wikipedia and researching on social media, Reddit, all this other stuff. A lot more people know us through that than they do from our on-the-ground presence, because our on-the-ground presence, we stylize ourselves based on a Leninist organization. We don't really like go out into crowds and organizing spaces wearing, American Party of Labor t-shirts and wearing American Party of Labor hats, and waving the American Party of Labor flag. We don't do that because we're Leninists and we're trying to organize people in even in like reactionary unions, and we're trying to organize people within our community. And not everyone is a communist. Not everyone is where we're at right now. And in order to educate them and make them more class conscious, we have to do the on-the-ground work in the places where they exist, places like unions, for instance, or give me 1 second. Sorry. Okay. Places like unions, places like I'm trying to think of a good example, like not labor focused, but mutual aid groups are one of those things that I'm kind of iffy on, but we have a presence in those places. So we like to focus on real on the ground work, and we're not really interested in like pushing our iconography or pushing our brand, but rather we would like to show people through organizing, let the people have the experience, the learning from their experiences as a collective body, that your congressperson is an agent of the imperialist bourgeoisie. You can't just tell them that. You have to show them that. You have to show them that their interests are with United Health and not with your health, your personal health, your family's health. So back to APL. So that's kind of where we come from historically. There's a lot of twists and turns. We became as of this year, or as of the end of last year, we became full members of the CIPO-ML, ICMLPO, which is the International Conference of Marxist-Leninist Parties and Organizations. We have PCR from Brazil. We have MEP in Turkey. We have in the Dominican Republic, we have the PCT, the Communist Workers' Party, or Partidad Comunista de Trabajadores, or something like that. I don't know how it's said in Spanish, but we have we used to have a presence in Chile. I don't know what happened with that. It's not really my place to say. But in Ecuador, the PCMLE, in Spain, the PCEML in Mexico, the Communist Party Mexico, Marxist-Leninist. Go ahead. Sorry, Javier.
Do you remember the name of the party or the organization that you were related in Chile?
Yeah, I believe it was. We weren't former member. We weren't formal. I should say formal members, official members. We were observer members of ICMLPO or CPOML at the time. But if I remember correctly, it was Proletarian Action. I believe it was.
Yes.
Yeah. AP.
You remember the name of Eduardo Artes?
Was that the chairperson?
Yes.
I don't really know much about him. I saw a video of him confronting a Venezuelan lady and screaming at her. I don't think that's. I don't know. It's one of those things that it seems kind of. It's not really my place to say, so I'm not gonna. I don't want to comment too much on it. But yeah.
Don't worry. But I just wanted to know to which organization you were related here. I don't have a problem with that party, because here in Chile we only have two communist party, the Communist Party Proletariat Action and the Communist Party of Chile. The second one, it's part of the administration of Gabriel Boric, and as you know, Gabriel Boric is someone that it couldn't be even classified as inside the left. So I just wanted to clear that out. We only have two communist parties, I could say, here in Chile. The other are some unorganized groups, but officially just two communist party. So I wanted to know to which one were you related?
Yeah, it was AP. I mean, let me clarify again that they're no longer members of CPOML.
Okay.
As far as I know, that's last I heard. And I don't really know the details why. I don't know if like they had some kind of because our brand in CPOML is anti-revisionism, Marxism-Leninism, and the anti-revisionism is it really is it's kind of redundant to say anti-revisionist Marxist-Leninist, because anti-revisionism is a plank of Leninism to start with. It's a foundational idea. Lenin's conflict with the Second International was built on this anti-opportunism, anti-revisionist ideology. And as time goes on, I mean, you could see the transfer of that thinking from Lenin to Stalin and Molotov, and then you could see that thinking throughout, and then it just sort of institutionally ends with Stalin. Stalin's critique, for instance, of Mao in China was very much that Mao was a bourgeois democratic national figure, and not a Marxist-Leninist, not a communist. But Mao's like brand aesthetically was communism, because it was very fashionable at that time. So it was it's very easy to get support from allies across the world when half the world is Marxist-Leninist. But again,
that's the position of the party, of the Communist Party Proletariat Action, the Chilean Proletariat Communist Party Proletariat Action. The position that you're describing is the one that the party holds. So I understand why you were close to them. I'm just trying to understand the different links between the different communist movements, that it's very complicated. Once you start studying them, how it moves, how it turns in a precision time in history, because here someone said this and someone did that, or someone invade a country, or it changes.
That's the same in all the world. All the world.
Yeah.
In Peru,
it's very, very hard to build a strong international communist movement, since we have all these discussions on who did this and who did that. That could be a historical problem, but I don't know how to solve it. I try to do it, but I think we could agree, if we are able to agree in 2 points. I mean, all communists from all let's say all branches or lines, if we can agree in 2 things, to me it would be just the great moment. It's just 2 things, but sometimes you just think about it and we cannot even agree in 1 thing. And it's terrible. If you're in, I'm not going to say an old Marxist, but you say you were in this since 2014.
Before that, because I used to be.
You're probably been a Marxist for 20 years.
That's about right.
So you know what I'm talking about. It's very hard, and it gets frustrating on time, because it's kind of, we cannot agree to do something together, and there are many communists in the world, and I think they're growing. They're not in a party, but they identify themselves as communists, and that's the thing. I think we should be able to agree in 2 things and just stay behind those 2 things and push them. But I'm just throwing ideas.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely is. Okay, so there's a lot there. That's a loaded thing. We could have a whole series of discussions on why this whole movement is broken, and what needs to happen for us to really unify and move towards a place of like a tendency towards merging instead of a tendency towards splitting. And this is partially by design, because I mean, if all things were perfect, communists throughout the country could be in the CPUSA. I was formerly, what I was trying to say earlier was, before I joined APL, I was CPUSA. When I was very young, I joined in like when I was like 19 or something. And I learned there. I learned a lot of things there. But they didn't really do a great job of, they didn't really have like revolutionary ideology. And it's very much like you said, kind of like the other Chilean party, the Communist Party of Chile, not AP, but the other one. It's very, very much, they're trying to maintain.
Democrats.
They're social democrats, exactly, and that's the same thing for CPUSA. And look, that's fine. We have to struggle against every tendency eventually, right? But at this point, like when it comes to doing on the ground work, when it comes to doing solidarity work for Palestine, I will invite CPUSA people on my organizing committee locally. And there are many, many good. I know a lot of people personally, because I grew up in CPUSA. I know a lot of people personally who are really, really, really good communists. They have they do maintain like some revolutionary mindset, but they tend to conform to the brand of like the excuses of like, oh, but that's crazy, you know, like I'm a revolutionary, but it's like a kind of like it's a different kind of opportunism. It's an opportunism that's very, very self-convincing. You have a little opportunist in your head talking to you, telling you that
I've got a question about this support of Palestine. These organizations that you are referring to, what they think about the two-state solution, or if they think that the solution for Palestine, for the conflict in Palestine, has to be at the end, after a long period of struggle, the goal of one state solution, one maybe federated state solution, or one state. What they think about these alternatives of for the solution of the conflict of Palestine, the goal that the movement for Palestine, the Palestine movement, the anti-colonial Palestine, the anti-Zionist Palestine movement have to obtain at the end.
So, if I'm understanding you correctly, I'm going to try to answer the best I can. You want to know kind of like what the difference between the organizations, or just like broadly, like what are the demands of the movement?
The difference between the organizations, what they think about the solution of Palestine.
Well, I can only speak for two organizations. Because actually I don't really know like groups like PSL, the Party for Liberation, Socialism and Liberation. It's more of a Trotskyist group, but like they're very. I don't know. That's one that could have its own discussion, to be honest. But I get the impression that a lot of these groups, these other socialist or communist branded groups, they all believe in or are pushing for, support the idea of the one democratic state of Palestine, where everyone has recognized. Equal recognized rights, regardless of national origin, religion, et cetera, very secular, and very much, like having a constitution resembling something like the United States. I think that's what a lot of people basically stand by. I do know when I left the CPUSA, I mean, I was also studying a lot of like Enver Hoxha and studying a lot of Stalin. So I was already primed to leave. But the big thing that made me leave the CPUSA was the official recognition of Israel as like a legitimate entity, not a criminal entity. Yeah.
No, that's unacceptable. That's unacceptable.
Yes, and that's why I left. So in 2014, and it was soft. It wasn't like a full-throated. The wording was clever. It was tricky. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but I remember that vote was very, very strained, and they had because I was a delegate at that convention, and I remember they had like a whip on the floor trying to get everyone to vote yes on the recognition of Israel, and that was a mistake. And I think they're suffering for that mistake. I don't know if they made any changes since, but
they're paying for that mistake.
Yes,
they're paying right now for a mistake. Yes, of course. But this thing that you are telling us, this is a scenario that you are inform us, must have to be, or maybe it's very related to the thing that in the USA, in the States, the Zionism is so strong that this movement, the Zionism, infiltrates all the left organizations, the labor organizations, the unions, or even the parties like that you are talking about.
Yeah, Zionism. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely, Zionism. The ideology, the sympathies for Zionism, And there are good people who subscribe to some level of like liberal Zionism or whatever you want to call it. I think it's really just a kind of there's an equation that they've been taught in their head that that like Israelis, because of the connection between the Jews and the Holocaust, Israelis cannot. They can't. I don't think that they think they get a free pass, but they think in their head that it's like not possible. That we have to assume the best possible intentions of the Israelis and the Israeli government, I should say more accurately, and the Zionist project. And these are people that like otherwise would vote. They would vote for
that could be easily a typical way of liberal thinking, and because almost all USA are the liberal thinking are mostly like common in the USA. Think about the freedom for one people. Eventually, the Jews, and the issue of talking about the Jews, the Jews communities, not only in the USA, in the entire world, is like have these tricky things. First, by the beginning, the way of thinking they use, like people, mostly in the contemporary age, that the people that doesn't have a mythical land that they were like expelled. That was a true 20 or 2,000 years ago.
Yes,
but now, or 1,000 and a half, but now not. They are
people do mistake. Yeah, they make these conflations with biblical stories and actually documented history. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. And to them, you're right, because the biblical stories are taught so, especially in the United States, they're taught so aggressively, metaphysics and idealism, religion, all that stuff. They're taught to children at a very young age. They get indoctrinated into Christian beliefs. There are a lot of Christian Zionists in the US. And so if you were to tell them the actual history in the assimilation of like, just people with Jewish ancestry into the communities where they ended up at, like most of the Israelis, you can't really, you'd have an easier time tracing their lineage back to London and the United States than you could tracing it back to Palestine. It's crazy. And Zionism is a race-based ideology, because if you look at the disparities I think some people are familiar with the Beta Jews in Ethiopia. There's a particular
the falashas, they're called.
Mm-hmm.
Falasha or something like that.
Falasha. Well, they get different treatment. It's a lot more difficult for them to become citizens of Israel, even though they have the same exact claim to Jewish ancestry as anybody else that claims from Europe or America, but they have
in theory for the Israeli society they have to, but this is so. That is like informative or revealing of the way of the colonial thinking of the Zionists in its own core, in its very core. Yeah.
And I'll say one more thing on just Zionism more broadly, but then I'll get back to the other groups. So Zionism, modern Zionism at this point is a fascist ideology. In practice, it is fascism.
Yes.
It is the military dictatorship of the imperialist bourgeoisie in Palestine. They have military checkpoints for civilians to get from one part of town to the other, and they have to check their credentials, and they have to make sure that they're white enough and they're not Muslim or whatever, or they have to apply for like certain passes and stuff. So they live under a constant fear of terrorism, and that's before we start talking about the endless bombing campaigns and the actual like torture and sexual assault of those civilians, human beings in Palestine, in Gaza, and
West Bank also.
the West Bank and the West Bank, yeah. So I mean, there's the whole project of modern day, like Zionism, Israel in the 21st century has fully, and not that I'm not saying that it wasn't fascist before, but like in its physical manifestation, it is honestly the like perfect example of what a modern fascist state looks like. There's not a better example in my view. It's yeah.
I agree with that. I agree with
Right.
that. Even they have to see terrorists in all in unsuspected things or suspecting.
You're born a terrorist. For Israelis,
Yes.
they if you're not Israeli,
Even you know, even well, because there are some cases I have not familiar related, but people that I know that have even passed with this experience of the checkpoints.
Mhm.
Even if you are very I have some roots with Palestine. My family came from there, from Ramallah.
Mm.
But even if there are some person that borns have Palestinian roots, but born abroad in another country and came to Palestine just for tourism or like visiting the land or the country, and they have to evaluate all the roots of this guy, even if it's Peruvian or Chilean. You know that maybe Javier maybe know some of these examples also. Many Chileans that go to Palestine, most of them came from Bethlehem, Belém in Spanish. They when they came for this experience of the checkpoints, the Israeli guardian, the Israeli soldiers put the sales that they are Palestinians, that they are not Chileans.
Yeah.
And that's very strong. It's a very strong thing of how they behave, of all these things of the apartheid state, kind of a state, or
No,
even
it is. Yeah, it's apartheid. Yeah.
fascist. All the adjectives are just like for them.
Yeah.
Fascist, apartheid, segregationist, all the adjectives.
And it really is the kind of and maybe I'm speaking a little. I mean, I think there are examples of this in other places around the world, but Israel is like really the last dying breath of that style of colonialism from the 20th century. Because one thing, a lot of people don't realize this. They see the communist movement worldwide as like a failure, right? For the most part, like I think we all have some kind of we could point to the fact that there are no communist countries right now, but the one thing that it set out to do most aggressively, it did achieve, and that was end 20th century style colonialism, and it did it permanently, with the exception of Israel. Everywhere else, all these other occupied countries, Vietnam, China, the list goes on and on. They won through Leninism, through the anti-imperialist quality of Leninism and the teachings of Lenin and Stalin. People won and achieved their national liberation, and their national identity is respected in a like how do I say, the governments that they formed are recognized officially by the global community of bourgeois governments. And if nothing else, that is the main victory of Marxism, Leninism in the 20th century, was the end of colonialism. Now it's manifested neocolonialism, austerity, IMF, that we have all these other problems now. But that direct occupational colonialism, again, I think really honestly exists in very few places. And I think most of all, it exists in Israel, or I should say in Palestine, in the form of essentially a military base that is Israel.
I wanted to say something here because you just touched the point. Is that for some reason, and I quite can't get, I don't know why it is like that, but for some reason, the people, and many people that consider themselves anti-Zionist, they see the relationship between the United States and Israel inverted, like Israel somehow is controlling the state. And of course, we know that the relationship is the other way. The Israel, I consider it like a piece, an extension of the United States. That's how I see it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, go ahead and continue.
See it inverted, like Israel is controlling somehow Trump or Biden or Harris or whoever, or the whole government, or they get into these Zionist lobbies and some conspiracy theories that there are some, I don't know, Zionist organization controlling everything. And it is not like that. It's the United States. It's behind Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Why people see it the other way, I can get the whole how that happened, how they see it like that.
I appreciate that you see it that way, because that's exactly how I see it. I've always had difficulty accepting and the thing is, I do know how people come to that conclusion, because there is kind of this Ouroboros of influence that happens. At this point, Israel started out as kind of almost the people that had most influence over Israel was the kind of dying empire of the UK, right? Rule Britannia. And that's how it kind of started. And kind of like the Vietnam War, right? It was the French that occupied French Indochina. And when they left, who took over? Who took over the fight? It was the United States. The United States was like, well, this is the world order that we wanted. So we're going to pick up where we have this kind of how do I say, like race supremacy ideology, a colonialist, imperialist expression of dominance, and for a lack of a better word, but the same thing I'd say is true for Israel too. The project of Israel was handed down from the different countries to the U.S. and yes, the U.S. Israel is an extension of U.S. military and market commercial power.
And many people that are willing to fight Israel don't see it like that. And if they knew how it really works materially, let's say, they could do more. And actually, if you think it like that, the United States, it's kind of getting a free pass here. It's like there are not many people. I mean, there are people blaming them because they're behind and they're giving weapons, but it's not only weapons, it's an extension. It's an imperialist extension of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And let's call it the Middle East, and they need it. And so whoever is fighting Israel, they're fighting the states, and they should know about it, because we want to fight the states. I mean, communists, we want to fight the states.
Yeah.
We have to fight the states.
Yeah. So I think again, I think you're 100% correct. I think there's a mix, and a lot of people domestically, I think, have this view because, number one, it is an actually very helpful, this anti-Semitic narrative. It is very helpful to the institutional powers, the CIA, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. It's very helpful to them because it removes the onus, the responsibility of Israel as a project of the United States from our own government, from our in our foreign policy. it says, you know, it creates this narrative that, oh, but there's this foreign influence within our government that has been exploited by the Israelis, and therefore they do the lobbying through AIPAC, which is true. And I will say, like, there is a little bit of truth to
there is a very, I think it's a pretty good I'm going to call it thinker. It's Mersheimer. I forgot his name. It's John Mersheimer. Do you know him?
The name sounds familiar.
Okay, well, he's pretty good, but he's just starting right now. He's old. He's over 70, probably over 80. He's just right now realizing that probably that the one that is behind Israel, it's his government, the United States. He's just now realizing that. And he's got a book on a Zionist lobby. He's pretty good, leaving aside the part that for many years, let's think that he doesn't think like that anymore. For many years, he saw the relationship inverted. And he's a pretty smart guy. And so if reality can fool him, just think how reality can fool everyone else.
Yeah, there are, and you know, I've fallen for it. I know exactly what the kind of things you're saying. There's a lot of there's a war for the hearts and minds of people constantly, and it's for these like more niche movements, more niche political ideas that become the identities of these kind of like small groupings of people. And I think when you look at like the capacity for Israel's information intelligence agency to have influence in over people in the United States, but also if you look at Russia's ability to do that too, you have a very similar problem where people live in two different realities, ignoring the actual material reality around them, and the narratives that are pushed become their entire life's purpose. There's definitely a bunch of people that I know, you know, whether it's through online interactions or in-person interactions, who are, you know, they think that in their reality, Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party are going to press a button one day and create, you know, and then turn their imperialism into socialism, into internationalism. One day, Vladimir Putin is going to take off the mask and reveal that he was Joseph Stalin the entire time. One day, you know, like the Bashar al-Assad's and other Baathists, you know, anti-democratic dictators are going to come together in like this unified thing and create some kind of internationalist movement. One day they'll recognize Kurdish independence. I don't know. It's all stuff that it's stuff that serves to create excuses for the occupying bourgeois governments of the world. Like it's everyone has a team that they're rooting for. I mean, even when we talk about U.S. imperialism, you know, this is something that gets labeled as, quote, U.S. imperialism, but really the imperialist bourgeoisie is a class that has no borders. It has no loyalty to the United States. If you come to the United States right now, you'll see a couple generations of people, of young people who they're in massive amounts of debt. They have no prospects for the future. Imperialism is their enemy too. It just manifests differently. It hasn't manifested just quite yet as bombs and military checkpoints. Right now, it's debt and the threat of jail for not paying your debts. It's taking your assets, taking your family's assets. It's you know, the threat of you know, medical debt, the threat of student debt. there, you know, we're all, the world proletariat should be aligned against imperialism. And imperialism is not, again, the imperialism of the United States, the imperialism of NATO. It's the imperialism of the imperialist bourgeoisie, which is a class of capitalists that, through their international conglomerates, through the stock market, through the universal circuit of markets connected together, express their power and economic and political domination, and impose borders on the proletariat. It's not the United States making the borders. It's the imperialist bourgeoisie that wants to have these disparities in wealth, disparities in development, because they benefit from that. They benefit from being able to pay for cheap labor in Sri Lanka, and then selling it to the better, like the higher income people of the United States or of Europe. It's not, it's not really this cut and dry thing. Everyone thinks kind of in these shallow binary terms, but they haven't done the studying to realize how the system really genuinely works.
You're right. There is a lot of discussion between us communists. If let's say Russia or China, you probably you fought with a lot of people and comrades over this. If they meet Lenin's criteria of imperialism, do they meet it? And there's a whole discussion. Here you have two fronts. A group of comrades and communist parties that say, no, it's just so stupid to call Russia imperialist because, and they give you a list why, according to them, Russia couldn't be imperialist under Lenin's criteria. And they do this the same with China. Well,
they don't know Lenin's criteria, to be very clear, because I will tell you right now,
I'm talking about discussions with people that know Lenin criteria. So we discuss seriously, trying to figure out scientifically if are they imperialist or not. And the arrow goes one way to the other. No, it is not. Yes, it is. No, it is not. Yes, it is. But yes, it is. But and I think that part, the constant fighting between how to think about China and Russia, it's one of the things that makes us fight all the time. I think we could and we should overcome the problem somehow. I don't know how, but somehow, because you can get the conclusion that of course they are imperialist. Just read Lenin's work, try to just read all the economic I don't know how to call it. It's not books, but all the economic data, all the historical data of how they economically, politically, militarily, how they work, and you are going to get to the conclusion that they're imperialist. Of course, they're capitalist, but now the next question is, now being that they're capitalist, are they imperialist? And you can get to the conclusion that they are, and that it gets you in an uncomfortable place with another comrades. Well, I get that all the time. I don't know why you think. I know your position. Probably I don't want to call you an anti-China or an anti-Russia. We should fight them. We should. I don't know what's your position. I mean, I think your position is against them, but I don't know how you try to equate it inside a proposal, a political proposal to the proletarians. Can you say something about that? Because of course I'm open to
how to see the imperialists from China and Russia, or how do you see it from your own perspective, and how do you see it, how the organization that you integrated see this?
Well, I will say so. It is there the Russophilia, the excuses, the Dengism, the Sinophilia, all that stuff that you get from the kind of Brezhnevite style communists that are ubiquitous throughout the United States and maybe Latin America as well. Everyone, I think two things. I think a lot of the old people coming from the the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, they saw this equation that the Soviet Union was the headquarters of the internationalist revolutionary proletariat movement, and to some degree, they were right. That's kind of how it stylized itself. But the Soviet Union fell to imperialist ambitions. It fell to the kind of sort of like Titoism style of capitalism.
I call it liberalism.
Yeah, it's liberalism. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I call it liberalism.
Yeah, and the same thing happened in China. Milton Friedman didn't go to China to take in the scenery. Milton Friedman was there advising Deng Xiaoping's economic policies, and it required essentially I guess more toned down Chilean style coup, the neoliberal coup that happened, where Pinochet got to exist unchallenged for decades, and
17 years, 17 years.
70, yeah, geez, that's a lot.
17.
17? Oh, 17. I was gonna say, like, I was doing the math.
17.
Yeah. So Chile, okay, so almost 2 decades. So this style of neoliberalism is what dictates where China is now. But what I'm saying is because these people had this fixation on in their mind, that the formula required the headquarters, right? The Soviet Union. They in lieu of the Soviet Union, with the absence of the Soviet Union, they see it as, well, we have to find a new headquarters. There has to be another established power. There has to be something to replace the Soviet Union. And they might not be thinking about it like that in those literal terms, but I think subconsciously they have no other way of thinking about it, these older people. And then these older people, their ideas extend to these younger people who suddenly the words of Lenin and Stalin on imperialism and the nature of the internationalist proletarian revolution no longer resembles what they were actually saying, but rather has been filtered through several other people's texts. People like Sam Marcy, who's a popular figure historically. Well, I should say more recently, but like he died in like the 70s or something like that, or like the 80s. But Sam Marcy synthesized Trotskyism and Brezhnevism, the actually existing socialism idea, the excuse that the Brezhnev administration of the Soviet Union put together to excuse their social imperialism, their own imperialist practice. So that you have to support AES, actually existing socialism, and that was the kind of slogan that came out of the Soviet Union. Well, that stuff carries over to today, and it carries over in the U.S. It developed along the lines of the same lines that neoconservatism developed, Marxism develops, and Browderism develops, and all these other anti-revolutionary, anti-internationalist ideas. And it leads us to a place where there's just this there's not this institutional help. But what I'm trying to say, there's not this institutional like center for education, for instance, like the Communist Party used to be. It used to dictate, right? Now we have this kind of Lord of the Fly situation where you have a bunch of people who know nothing about communism, who know nothing about Leninism, who know nothing about Marxism, writing the new standards for what is Leninism, what is Marxism, and dictating that to a bunch of other ignorant people, and they all eat it up like it's dessert. and they that kind of I get into these conversations sometimes where because I teach a very specific contingency of people, like our way of thinking, the kind of actually Leninist way of thinking. And then I get self-satisfied. I'm like, oh man, all of our members, all of our new young members, they're all real Leninists. They're all real anti-imperialists. They're all real communists. And so then I go out into the world and I start doing organizing work. And then, some new group pops up. I'm not going to name any names, but like a new group will pop up and they'll call themselves like something about like the Strategy and Revolutionary Education Group or whatever. And they'll have all these backwards ideas that I have been trying to wring out of our new members in the APL. And they have institutionalized these reactionary ideas to where like I've seen, I don't know, I just see some really ridiculous, like people that they'll say that Russia is 100% justified in invading Ukraine. And it's like, why do you think that? Well, because Ukraine is full of Nazis. And I'm like, yo, how long have you been following this? Because in the earliest days of this invasion, the Orlov and Spartacus battalions of Russia have a whole bunch of Nazi iconography. They're led by Nazis. The PMC group that they all celebrate, the Wagner group, that's not a Russian word. Wagner is not a Russian word. That's a German word. Like the founder of the Wagner group was a neo-Nazi. The National Bolshevik Duganist people, look at their iconography. Look, it's, yeah, sure, there's a hammer and sickle, but like really, you have to be really dense not to see the Nazi flag there. Go ahead.
I just wanted to, since you brought up the subject of Dugin, I wanted you to ask you about your opinion of the American. Okay, I'm gonna say the word because I think they're not Communist Party that just was founded about, let's say, 7 or 8 months ago. I wanted to know because I've been doing some research about them. I've been discussing with them. I've been getting into some fights with them also. I'd love to get into a nice fight with a guy that says that as a communist that it's not, and it's defending truckers. And I just wanted to know your opinion about the ACP. Just feel free to say whatever you want. Okay.
I think, okay, so
let's enter to that question. So go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. By the way, if I didn't finish, if I didn't tie up any loose ends in the previous conversations, because we went from but okay. So hopefully I was able to represent our ideas as much as possible. But
yeah, you did. I mean, at least to me, I understood where you're standing, where your organization is standing. It's pretty clear to me.
Sebastian, you're with the mic off.
Oh, thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay. I apologize. So all of these tendencies, they all, the ones that we've been talking about, they all kind of manifest eventually into something like mutated, something toxic, right? And because they've gone so much unchecked over time, like all the opportunism of the CPUSA and all these other groups, eventually people grow tired. They don't see results, and at the same time, they're not being taught why they're not seeing results. So they they look in other corners of ideology or politics, economy, or whatever, and they try to find solutions. They try to find and a lot of them are very young, and they just don't have again, one of the things that the APL is trying to do is we're trying to kind of build a robust educational infrastructure, because a lot of these people, they're ossified around these ideas. You tell them, you talk to them, and there is no way of convincing some of them that that what they believe in is not Marxism. They're very confident about it because influential people tell them that this is communism, but they aren't getting the proper education. So to some degree, I can't fault the individual young people who join these groups.
You shouldn't. You're right not to blame them. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and I don't think they should be branded as fascists and liberals for the rest of their lives or anything like that. But there is a Pied Piper situation happening here. There's okay. So I'm going to talk about some things about the history of the origins of the ACP. And I know this, unfortunately, I don't spend a lot of time online. You can find me on Twitter, but I don't post anything on Twitter. I just repost stuff from the APL, from our news organization. But I've had Twitter since like 2009. But I've been involved in the communist movement since the Obama years, which I guess 2009 would be one of those years. So I've seen the kind of moves and ebbs and flows into where we're at now with what I would call social fascism. And what that means is socialist in iconography, socialist in aesthetics and language, but effectively lending a platform to fascism, fascist ideas, or outright being fascist, right? This is what social fascism is, like social imperialism, social chauvinism, words that Lenin used. Social in front of everything typically means socialist in name only, right? So, so the social fascist movement, I don't think it's entirely self-aware. I think a lot of the leadership is aware of what it's doing. People like Haz al-Din, who's someone I never heard of until like a couple of years ago. Just kind of like through internet drama, people would bring into my attention every so often. I'm just like, all right, this guy's not a real person. Like his ideas are not to be like, this is not something you can actually engage with. He's an internet personality. He's an E-list celebrity or whatever you want to call it. And the same thing for Jackson Hinkle. Jackson Hinkle comes from originally he ran as a Democratic Party candidate in California, I believe. And then when that wasn't successful, he met with some people and switched his politics, switched up his game. So before all this, though, there was a person named Caleb Maupin who used to be in an organization called World Workers' Party. It's one of these Marxist organizations, these kind of like Trotskyist, Brezhnevist amalgamation groups. There's like 4 of these groups, I think. So this guy Caleb Maupin would leave the Brezhnevist group, the Marxist group, I should say, eventually to do his own project, and he got a lot of connections because he kept showing up on RT.com. The news, the Russian news station in English, and then also Press TV, which Press TV, I believe, is owned by the Iranian government. And so he would go on to these news organizations as a regular commentator. He has no real like bona fides, to be honest. He has no real how do I say, like there's nothing that makes him a more important commentator than like I don't know, like literally any person you find on the street. And he's a little more smarter. He did study a lot of Trotsky and Lenin and so on and so forth. But other than that, like he doesn't really have like a huge history of success at this point. But he's showing up on these channels or whatever. So eventually he leaves because he thinks that he's better by himself than with this organization that's holding him back. And he absolutely, and I could say with a very little doubt that he has been paid by the Russian government and by the Iranian government, picking up money because we formerly had a member who would become one of these people, one of these more popular people, who left us to join his project, which was the Center for Political Innovation, which was the people who kind of came up with the idea of quote unquote MAGA communism. So at the same time, you have to look at the world. The world, you have the Putin and Donald Trump the media is kind of putting them in alignment. And to some degree, Donald Trump is really easily manipulated by the media and flattery and all this other stuff. So eventually he does come into alignment with Vladimir Putin on a lot of subjects. And at some point, you have like Fox News, another very reactionary media empire in the United States and frankly globally, owned by Rupert Murdoch at the time. I think still owned by Rupert Murdoch, but managed by his children. But Tucker Carlson gives way to Jackson Hinkle, who entered into this project with Caleb Maupin, because Caleb Maupin was just looking for anybody, just looking for and that's how I know one of our people went to Caleb Maupin at some point. And the person was telling us, like step by step what was happening. And we were like, you're not really thinking about starting a career with RT, are you? And they're like, well, maybe there's a lot of money involved. And I'm like, I don't, I really don't think that you should be here. But eventually, so they leave to do the RT thing. And that person actually is a person named Don Corder, who recently made a movie that got an award in Russia, of course, an anti-war award in Russia, defending Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This person, Don Corder, is the quote unquote director of that movie. It's Kremlin propaganda. The Kremlin directed the movie. He just did the interviews according to their needs. But Don Corder, is part of this family of MAGA communists, CPI, ACP people. So Caleb Maupin goes around and creates this super group of just reactionary, I don't know, just internet personalities, I guess, including Hazeldin, including I don't know. There's Jackson Hinkle. There's a couple others that their names escape me. I know this kind of broadly just because of my experience and kind of just where I've been, the past couple of decades. But I'm not intimately involved with any of these things. So I there's some details I'm going to get wrong. But kind of on a global scale, on it, if I was just to have a synopsis, this is what's happening.
This kind of people is just doing by the things you are telling to us, like a propaganda work, but also a work of making ideology construction for their own purpose.
And what they're doing is not new. I mean, what they're doing has been happening since technically, even before the 90s, but they're just kind of replicating the Duginist style of organizing and messaging. Javier, you have a question?
It's not a question. It's just I wanted to, if you guys allow me to, I wanted to make kind of a presentation of what I think on how the ACP came to reality. I just wanted to say so. If you allow me, it's going to take maybe, I don't know, I couldn't say 3 minutes, but...
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I think the case of the ACP is that while it originates from an ideological current of red-brownism and generalized multipolarity within online leftist circles, it holds absolutely no material or national relevance. In other words, its proposal for organizing the working class in the US essentially boils down to tailing the MAGA movement. One thing to understand about the ACP is that it is not a conventional party. It is literally a hyper-personalist project developed by Has Aldin. He's an online personality within the universe of political streamers. In fact, I don't know if this is true. If you can confirm it. Has original idea was to carry out entries into the CP USA, and they even have a code name for that. I think it was CP USA 2036. Well, that finally it was pretty public, but the truth is that the entire CP USA 2036 operation was just a clownish antics of a bunch of online kids. I never posted any threat to the actual CP USA. So this combined with the merger with Midwestern Marx gave birth to what we know right now as the ACP. So the ACP is thus composed by three elements. It would be the infrared, the Midwestern Marxism, and the militant base. The infrared, you probably know it. Of course, you should know it. It's just the reactionary meme alt-right collective led by Has Aldin, and they operate with sophisticated social media manipulation techniques, and they organize around various online communities. The Midwestern Marx, it's a content creator group consisting of this guy called Eddie, I don't know how you pronounce it, Liger, but Eddie Liger, I'm going to say it, Noah K. and Carlos Garrido. Eddie and Carlos come from the disenchanted part of the social democratic background after Bernie Sanders failed campaign. They attempt to adapt their kind of naive and inexperienced way of thinking of Marxism into what they call the true material reality of the working class or something like that. They sought to make Marxist critiques more palpable to the center-right, let's say, populace. And that would be the second component. And the third component would be the ACP's real membership. This includes some of the infrared members, that it's just a minority. Some controversial figures like in the leftist movements, like all those related to the anti-woke positions. They're pretty conservative. It's conservatism and nationalism. It's what's behind that movement. And since these guys didn't have any other place to organize, lastly, they just joined the group. These three elements form kind of a hierarchy. It's a hierarchy. I don't know how to pronounce that. Hierarchy. Chain of authority, ranked from the most respected to the least relevant and neglected. And you have Has and Hinkle at the top.
Yeah. So I think you hit on something that's a really important theme here, and that is the nature, like the very, very internet centric, social media based nature of this organization. Yeah. And look, social media is I'm not saying that it's not important. I'm not saying that it can't be like a tool for us in organizing. Obviously, we all, I've used it to a great effect in the past, doing like local organizing. But when your whole thing is kind of like exclusively digital. You live in a fantasy world. This is like, these are not real politics. These are not real ideas that people are going to engage with. Do they have like membership on the ground? I think so. I do believe that they have people who like feel like they're completing tactical objectives for their strategic aims. But if you ask them what their strategic aims are, they probably really couldn't articulate that. And they certainly
they're more focused on has this kind of a debate, bro. It's just a young man trying to win the public debate, and by invoking just obscure and ideological references. You know his background, Dugin and Heidegger, and the other one, Nick Land. Have you read Nick Land?
I have not, no.
Well, Nick Land, he just
Me
know who Nick Land is, just to be aware of how his ideas are entering what we call left and even Marxism, in the name of
accelerationism. Yeah.
Acceleration. Oh, I can't pronounce that. I'm sorry, but you know what I mean. Acceleration.
Yeah, creating conditions that are so accelerationism is like participating in the kind of downfall of adding to the misery of in this case like the workers, in order for them to reject capitalism. But accelerationism means many things. It's broad, but it could be everything from just voting for like people like Donald Trump, voting in for fascists, with the objective of just making things so terrible that people have to respond to it, or even actual terrorism. Doing acts of terror in order to accelerate into. And to me, this is like a kind of like a neoconservatism. Neoconservatism. It comes from like the Trotskyist school of thought, and it hates Stalinists so much, but wants to create a situation where the U.S. empire is so ubiquitous and expanding and influential that eventually all governments would be like, I'm kind of speaking for neoconservatives here, but like all governments would be under the complete domination of the U.S. to the point where the U.S. might actually just wither away. So it's trying to come to these like revolutionary conclusions, but like working backwards and not really being thoughtful of what these things mean. But I don't know, like Nick Land. I'll look into him. I'm sure I could add him to the trash heap of social fascist thinkers. I'm sure.
Yeah, he is. He's one.
There are some issues. I don't know. I'm sorry if I interrupt. There are some issues that came out from the comments of our public, the people that are seeing us in the stream. One of these commentaries or questions even are that is China could be conceived like a social imperialism. I don't know if you, Sebastian, you're familiar with Enver Hoxha way of thinking, line of thinking. You know Enver Hoxha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think he category or he characterized China as like a social imperialism. And Taro is asking, because Taro is so more or less Enversista.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
Cool.
He's asking if for you China is like a social imperialism in the Enver way.
I would say so. So one, we're talking about much earlier criteria for Lenin's what is imperialism, and I mean, it really simply, the first thing that the first qualifying like question you should ask is a country's government host to stock trade. because that's like the way that imperialist entities build their empires, is through buying up shares of companies and eventual, how do I say, decision making ownership of their shares will determine the outcomes of votes for one company or another. So the first question you ask yourself is a country host to stock markets? And if the answer is yes, then yeah, it's imperialist. And that's not to say that necessarily that the Chinese government itself is imperialist. It's that the imperialist bourgeoisie in China control the Chinese government, much like our imperialist bourgeoisie in the United States control, have influence over our government. But there are Chinese companies, Tencent is one of them, right? Tencent has ownership of I think majority ownership of, I want to say, Epic Games, and Epic Games owns Bandcamp, and like Bandcamp is something that we in the US use all the time to support like small artists, small musical artists. And yeah, and so we're really talking about these networks of businesses and subsidiaries and the giant conglomerates that control them all. Those are the real imperialists. So for me to sit here and say that China is imperialist, I think is not a perfect characterization, but rather China, the economy of China and the government of China is host to imperialism. Yes. If that's what makes China imperialist, then yes, China is imperialist.
In that way.
Yeah,
that is host with this.
Right. And it's social imperialist because it still purports to be a socialist project, which it frankly just isn't. But its imperialist ambitions greatly outweigh its need for social and economic justice.
It's like an issue that we could talking about long and long, but your position is like very, very interesting. I don't know if it's the same as Ember, but it's a
yeah. Enver Hoxha in Imperialism and Revolution very accurately, I think, described China as at the time have like I'm not sure if he used the term social imperialism. I'm sure he did.
I think he did.
Yeah, but I do
have to look it up. But I think he used it.
He definitely highlighted conversations that were happening within the Chinese Communist Party at the time, where people were moving towards. I should say not even moving towards, but just like kind of letting it be known more publicly that they had national ambitions to become a superpower, competitive with the United States. And I mean, look where we're at. Enver Hoxha wasn't wrong. China is, by every metric, is the second largest imperialist power in the history of the world.
In the history of the world, yes.
Yeah.
Another question, another thing, another commentary. The comrades, the compañeros, we could say in Spanish, the comrades from the organization that we are links with in Ukraine. That they are also Marxist-Leninist, as you are. They say when we get this interview 2 weeks ago with them, they told us that they characterize Russia as regional imperialism. So Taro wants to know, for curiosity, if you have the same lecture from your from you about Russia, because we were talking about Russia a minute ago. It could be characterized Russia as regional imperialism. Maybe there could be a model of this kind of regional imperialism, maybe with its difference. With the case of Iran could be also maybe a potential in this region that is mostly Middle East. For me, it's more like West, East, or Central Asia. So maybe Russia could be something like that for you. It's from Taro.
So the way I would put this, because I think it kind of feeds into and I'm not not trying to characterize anyone as saying one thing or the other, but I think it feeds into a little bit of the Duginist framework of thinking, that kind of like regional multipolarity stuff, like spheres of influence is what they like to talk about. But put simply, I mean, again, the criteria may remain the same. Russia is host to stock markets, which is host to imperialism. The Russian style of governance is very similar to that in the United States. You have this oligarchy in the United States that doesn't necessarily even have to dictate to the president or Congress on what it needs from them. A lot of it manifests in the stock market. So when Nancy Pelosi needs to get some more money, more than she's afforded in Congress, she will help pass the CHIPS Act. And then before the CHIP Act passes, she'll buy a whole bunch of stock in NVIDIA and Intel or whatever. And so there doesn't need to be direct coordination, but there is still direct coordination through lobbying, through like meeting with industry giants or whatever. The companies that are too big to fail, all that kind of stuff. Big banks, they still interface with them. But as Lenin says in Imperialism, the high stage of capitalism, there doesn't need to be this direct coordination, because stock markets exist, and because people's careers and what they do for these companies ultimately will pay off through the recognition by these companies, whether it's a job as a consultant or whatever. Well, in the case of Russia, Russia is imperialist. It does the same things. It has the same criteria. It has stock markets. It does stock buybacks. It has a very, very robust arms manufacturing industry. And I think the biggest difference is that a lot of these things are like joint ownership projects. So like the government of Russia has a certain amount of stock in this or that company. I think the same thing is true in the U.S. But ultimately, what they are doing in Ukraine is a kind of, again, military expansion is a factor, or like I should say a feature of imperialism, but it's not like the defining thing, right? Everything else is, though, and we need to not make the mistake of saying that like its imperialism is like regionally confined, because it's not. It has global implications. Russia is host to Sberbank. I think that's how you say it. It's one of the big banks in Russia, and they account for like 40% of all deposits in Central and Eastern Europe. So this is imperialism. This is what it looks like. It's financial, and the people who think they're qualified to dictate what is and isn't imperialism based on like the military campaigns of these armies, these people, I wish they would take a step back, be a little bit humbled, and read a couple books. I think they would be very enlightening. But that's not to insult anyone. To be clear, I'm really not trying to insult anyone. I just think that people are confined to these like almost like bourgeois frameworks of thinking about they're not thinking in terms of the class struggle. The class struggle, the fight against the imperialist bourgeoisie, is something that happens on many different planes of existence, not just within the borders of countries. I hope I'm answering the question, but I wouldn't characterize Russia as regionally imperialist or only interested in the immediate surroundings or what it thinks it has claim to. I think it is as imperialist. Its ambitions are as imperialist as the United States or Germany or France. The difference is that it's maybe ranked like 16th in the country with the most highest concentration of foreign assets. I will say one more thing though, and I think this is a really important detail when people try to navigate Lenin, and that is.
Yes, I think the concentration of assets, of economic assets, is the definitive character and adjective or character form of characterizing, for a start, a capitalist country, a capitalist government.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, it's easily to see the intentions of politics of external politics of some countries that
Yeah.
could be imperialist in the practice, even in the practice of them.
Yeah, yeah. So let me say one last thing on this, and that is a comrade of mine a long time ago put it this way to me, and I thought this was really, really enlightening. But when Lenin wrote "Imperialism: The Highest Stage of Capitalism," there was not a single country, government, entity, imperialist organization, conglomerate that had as much wealth and influence and imperialist power as Russia has today. And people want to be very, very like relative about like, well, the U.S. is the biggest, so therefore it's like the main enemy, the main imperialist enemy. And like, yeah, all bourgeois governments, all of the people who like, I think that the world order as it is Russia, China, the U.S., EU, all these people love how things are. Yeah, there's struggles. There's struggles for resources here and there to lay claim to raw materials in order for their bourgeoisie to get the most bang for their buck. But at the end of the day, I don't think Russia actually wants to see the U.S. go away as it is right now. I think it just wants a bigger piece of the pie. I think the same thing is true for China. I think more so for China. I think China really likes where it's at right now economically, and it really does appreciate the world order as it is. So,
some of the Maoists here in Peru, the Maoist organizations and the Maoist people here don't recognize. Yeah, you mentioned China just like now, no? But they don't recognize that, as Taro said me in the private chat, some Chinese companies were trading in the stock market, even if in the Cultural Revolution, in the Cultural Revolution, and they don't recognize it.
Yeah,
because they don't. It's not. It's against their own interest of this right now in the 2025. Maoists here in Peru, some of them link it to this scenario that we lived in Peru in the 80s. I don't know if you know about that, about the lightning path and all this.
Yeah, I would be interested in talking at some point. Definitely. I mean, I'd be open to doing something like this again. But I would definitely be interested in learning more about like how I guess, because I know Shining Path from what I understand, Gonzalo and Shining Path have had kind of a I think most people in Latin America would agree, a very negative impact on the kind of proletarian struggles in Peru.
Yeah, very. They're also, there could be like even for my own perspective, they could be like the Pol Pot of Peru.
Yeah, no, actually, I agree. And you know, it's funny because it's one of those things, just like Duginism. That's another thing that gets exported into this kind of like wasteland that is American communistic, the American communist conversation. I guess I don't want to call it politics because it's so diverse in a way that it really shouldn't be. But I mean, we have. I think there are probably more like Gonzaloists, and
Gonzaloists.
It's a phenomena that is almost exclusively online, with some exceptions. But you know, like
and that kind of people don't recognize this thing about the Chinese companies.
Yeah, and I will say the places where the Gonzaloist thought has manifested physically in the U.S. Has manifested in a way I would describe as almost fascistic violence. Like there has been Gonzaloists like going into like, you know, social democratic spaces and just smashing up presentation equipment, like you know, like basically classroom equipment, and having like harassing things. Meanwhile, and these places where they do this are like in the rural South of America. And like, meanwhile, there's like the neo-Nazis that they don't interface with at all. They would rather, it's easier to go after the kind of like naive social democrat, the reformists, and meet them with violence than it is to go into a neo-Nazi rally or something and try the same thing. They don't do that. So I mean, I would argue it is kind of also different in a different way. Maybe calling it social fascist is not correct. It's adventuristic, but I mean, I don't know. In some ways, that violence does do a lot of damage.
In some aspect, they are like make the basement, the foundation of this like kind of imperialist politics. No, I maybe even they are conscious about this, and in the other aspect, they are, like you said, they're acting in a fascist way.
Yeah, I think people who are interested in organizing a Marxist-Leninist organization. I mean, first of all, if you're interested in joining a Marxist-Leninist organization, you live in the U.S. Consider trying to join the APL. I mean, we have high standards. We don't just let anybody in. I'd say we basically 10% of all of our like applicants end up becoming members before. I mean, that's before we even get into like the interview part. I mean, and I do want to open that up a little bit more, but what I'm trying to say is, okay, so the people that kind of fall into these things, like Gonzaloism and Duginism in the U.S. I feel like it's an accessibility thing. I think it's because they can just kind of waltz in, and they just have to call themselves a communist. But I need people to know that, like, yeah, if that's like the main criteria for you to join an organization, you need to be suspicious of that organization. In a Leninist organization requires you to study. Ideally, the APL would have like, and we're hoping to do this one day, but we would have like a school that people could go to or do online, where they can study Marxism-Leninism. But if all you really need to do is just like accept the tenets of this or that like random social fascist grouping, and I mean you wouldn't know that it was social fascist, just not going there unequipped with knowledge. But I don't know. The only real advice I could give people is like, do this. I think the number one most important thing is if you don't read anything else, at least understand the purpose of a party. And you need to go and read chapter 8 of Foundations of Leninism by Joseph Stalin, where Joseph Stalin outlines in no uncertain terms how a communist party is supposed to behave and what its purpose is. Its purpose is not to create a brand. It's not to win in a popularity contest. Its purpose is not to be populist. In fact, the opposite. I think that's another issue, is that in America, everyone's talking about populism. Populism is one of the foundational, it's essential for fascism. Fascism depends on populism. Communists don't do populism. We do principle. We have principles. And what we do is we try our best to communicate our principles through slogans and through political campaigns and through experience and demonstration. That's how the workers need to get closer to us in our movement. We can't dilute ourselves and try to appeal to the worst elements of the worst inclination of workers that have been won over by nationalism and have been won over by xenophobia and all kinds of backwards draconian ideas and philosophies. We have to we have to make them materially move towards us. And a lot of times that's going to manifest in labor organizing and fighting for achievable economic victories. And that's where you're going to see APL in the future. It's going to be in these spaces. And that's where you could see APL right now, is in these spaces. So
that's a nice goal. Yes. Jim wants to ask something.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I just have a question. We're talking about all these lines of Marxism, and you haven't touched one that it's pretty much a trend or a fade. You probably have seen it online. It's very popular between very young people. I'm talking about Bordigism, left communism.
Yeah.
What do you think about Bordigism?
I to be honest, I'm not. I have comrades who are very familiar with Bordiga and Bordigism. I always thought it was a joke. I like, like some people back in, like, I want to say when I first got on the internet, in communist spaces on the internet, I should say. I've always been on the internet. There's like 3 different tendencies, are kind of like playful references. One of them is Bordigism. One of them is Posadism. I think it's Posadism. Is that it? You know what I'm talking about? It's the weird UFO from Posad.
Posad, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
These are like
Argentinian guy.
Argentina. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
No, you just don't get me started. But yeah, I know it.
Yeah. So I mean, these are like almost like jokes that people like push around. The problem with people that learn in online spaces is that there are no like parameters. There's no specific goal in mind when they're studying these kind of niche, niche weirdo ideas that, and people like that. Like, the people are, Americans in particular, are very hyper individualistic. So if they can absorb some niche thing, and I used to be this way. I mean, back in the day before like Netflix was a thing, I was like watching like old Japanese horror cinema that like no one's ever heard of in the United States. And then Netflix came around, and then suddenly when I'm talking about like Tetsuo the Iron Man, it's a movie, the 5 other people in the bar with me have already seen it. And I'm like, whoa, like this was my thing. But and I feel like people have that same inclination with Marxist ideas, or any political ideas really, and they want to find these very, very specific deviations in order to kind of find their identity, not to express their identity. They don't want to project their individual contributions to Marxism, Leninism. They want someone to find. They want to find the specific part of ideology or history or pop culture, wherever, that they can dominate, that they can fit in, that they can be an expert on. And a lot of
they want to be considered edgy.
Yeah, I mean that's really what it is. They want to have some. I mean,
they want to be considered edgy.
Yeah. I when I meet a new person who calls themselves a communist in like real life, I could tell right away that most of them have been educated on like Twitter or Facebook or whatever. It's not an inherently bad thing, but like a lot of them get ossified around these really stupid ideas. I mean, again, I don't know the legacy of Bordiga's contributions to political conversations, to be fair, so I'm probably not doing any justice here. But in my understanding, it's mostly back in like 2010, 2009, these things were referred to as playfully as jokes. Posadism, Bordiga, De Leonism. No one seriously thinks of these as contenders for like building a movement. It really is just these individual expressions of. I mean, I don't know if someone can give me an argument from Bordiga, I'd love to engage with that and tell them why they're wrong. I'm a Marxist-Leninist. I've studied Lenin. The world was split in half at one point in history, because of Lenin's contributions, not because of Bordiga's contributions, not because of Murray Bookchin, not because of anyone else, but Lenin and Stalin split the world in half in a social in the revolutionary proletariat camp and then the imperialist bourgeoisie camp. And that should be the metric on which people use to determine what ideological adherences they have to an actual liberation movement, a class liberation movement. They should look towards Lenin and Stalin because of the proof of history, right? The proof of work. And I'm not saying that new ideas are not acceptable. They, of course, we could talk about new ideas, but we have to put those into practice. And by not engaging, by isolating yourself in these little camps of small niche ideological, sandboxes or playpens or whatever, you're not affecting any kind of place where you can have real conversations that can lead to meaningful change, that can lead to a revolutionary movement.
Because they don't want to do that. They
don't. No, they're very comfortable. Yeah, it's kind of like
very comfortable. So
yeah,
Jaime has his own.
Something started to grow between their own niche. They would run away from it because it would change something. And they're very comfortable. They don't want to change it. They just want to be
their comfort zone.
Yeah.
Jaime has his own issues, his own troubles, his own struggles with this kind of people.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Jaime, I would love to follow you on social media.
I write in Spanish, but I have some. Sometimes I would post in English also. You can follow me.
Yeah. I will. After this, I'll follow up with you. I want to get some of your social media or whatever, your website or whatever. If you have Instagram, I'm normally on
maybe it could be a nice, another nice issue of investigation, another nice line of investigation. To know that if this kind of conduct, this kind of follow your comfort zone, your subculture, your own ambient, even in the Marxist movement, in the Marxist all kind of movements that you said, some niche that people relate to, identifies with, and that just get away from the conversation. It could be maybe a nice issue of investigation in the cultural studies, that it is something related to the American way of thinking. I don't know, but people don't like nowadays. I don't know, the new generations, the Zoomers, or even that there's a need of conversation, or maybe debate of ideas, and not of tax or identities. We don't. If we will discuss about politics and the real things that people are needed to be talking about, that just conducts all of us to the goal of the revolution. We have to discuss about ideas, concrete ideas, of politics, and not what I think that is the better thing that for me that has to be, or another one.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to characterize that, is that people are not looking for solutions to the universal problem of imperialist and capitalist domination, but they're looking for solutions for their personal problem, to add value to their life. And I mean, they can do that.
Individualism in the essence, that's individualism.
Yeah, and people try to atomize us in the APL. They've given us the label of Hojaist, as if that's something that's distinctly different from Marxism, Leninism.
In 5 minutes, the stream will end.
Okay.
And maybe we could all the three ones
Gladly, yeah.
say our last things or ideas for the people that are just watching us.
En realidad quedan ya 5 minutos.
5 minutes. 5 minutes. And after that, after those 5 minutes, we could just continue with the talking. But
do we want to move over right now? I don't.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we could just move over right now. But
go ahead. Okay, you can.
I could finish up.
Finish.
So I mean, what I'm saying is, people try to atomize us and put us into these like niche categories as well. But I mean, look, at the end of the day, there's no ideology that's Hojaism. It's just Marxism Leninism, and it's Marxism Leninism because no one is purporting that Hoja is an advancement of Leninism or Marxism, and I mean, Enver Hoja didn't like detract from the strategic goals of the revolutionary internationalist proletariat. It's the things that define Hojaism, I think, in people's heads are almost like jokes. But there's no contribution that Enver Hoja gave to us outside of an updated like check-in on the state of modern revisionism at the time, which was manifested as Titoism and Maoism and all other kinds of things. But it's not any different than what Joseph Stalin was saying at the time. Like, I mean, before, I shouldn't say at the time, Joseph Stalin was dead, but it's not, it doesn't detract, it doesn't deviate away from the kind of broad analysis of the state of the world at the time. But again, we're not purporting, like, when people join us, like our organization, we're looking for leaders in labor, we're looking for leaders in community groups and leaders in proletarian organizations, just more broadly, and we don't care. Our first question is not like, do you accept Enver Hoja as as like the leading figure of the communist movement in the 21st century? No, that's crazy. We're Marxist Leninists, and no person is a deity. Like we have to, we read Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin. We read Enver Hoja, but we also we read the texts of our enemies, our ideological opponents, I should say, not enemies, because we want to understand where they're coming from. We want to understand what drives what motivates them. But yeah, so I don't know. The internet's kind of a double-edged sword, because honestly, I think we'd have more success if it just didn't exist right now. I think the world communist movement would be in a better place, because I think we often let ourselves get bogged down by people who are not having genuine contributions to a discussion. They want to catch you in a fallacy. They want to catch you in a whatever. They want to be able to say that they're smarter than you, and for one reason or another. Yeah.
Well, we have only 3 minutes, and I think that's all for today for our public, the people that are watching us from the streaming in the channel, in the YouTube channel of the Grupo Obrero de Formación Marxista, in English, Marxist Formation Group. Marxist Studies Group of Workers, a group that we are forming here in Peru and Latin America for the broadcasting, the diffusion, the distribution of the knowledge about Marxism, about politics. And we'll continue after this stream talkings with Sebastian, and this interview will be shared with all our contacts in Latin America, in Peru, just to know, because we are doing this work of broadcasting, of diffusion about Marxism, about commentaries about politics in the world. Maybe in another interview we'll talk again with Sebastian and talking about specifically the situation of United States, of Trump. And in another, maybe in a third way, in a third interview, we'll discuss about.
Abdel, sorry. Ya finish.
Sí.
Finish.
Sí. Ahí, córtala. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.